Guerrero. Welcome to another episode of On Campus. I'm Myckena Guerrero, and today I'm joined with Jack Schouten. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
So go ahead and explain your story and kind of how you ended up here at Solano.
How I ended up here at Solano. I was going to school at Sac State and taking classes there, and I applied for a TA, and in doing that, a couple friends of mine, Sherry Papst and Sharon Stever, were working here, and they said, you know, you should try to work maybe part-time here. So I came in for an interview, and I was lucky enough to be hired, and I was a rarity on the Sac State staff to be a teaching assistant there at the same time I had a part-time position here at Solano. Great experience, enjoyed it ever since.
Now, you were telling me a little bit earlier that it was kind of a journey that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You had a lot of different things that you were interested in, so kind of explain that journey and kind of how you got into the teaching aspect.
Sure. There's a quote from Samuel Beckett, and it goes, fail, fail again, fail better. And so I like to practice failure, and I think that's the way we learn. So when I was in 5th grade, that would make me 10 years old, it was thought by the school that I should decide what I want to do with the rest of my life. And this wasn't uncommon for my generation. So my mother and father were called in, a principal, a counselor, and a teacher. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, if I'm honest, I want to be a cowboy. And they laughed at this and said, you can't be a cowboy. They don't exist anymore. So they put me in agriculture, and they said, focus on that. Well, I went to school at American River College and started there, and I was kind of from the school of hard knocks. So it took me forever to get through it, and if any of my students are out there right now, please note, stay with it, persevere. So I started off in agriculture, so that's 1, agribusiness 2, business 3, business management 4, accounting 5, and finally economics. And then I said, let's call the whole thing off, because all this time I love to write and read. And I found out from I think my counselor, Art Phillips was his name, I said, let me get this right. I can get in front of a classroom, teach the book I want, talk about it. It's kind of like a book club. And he said, yeah, and I get paid for that. And he says, yes. And I said, sign me up. And so here I am. I've been enjoying it ever since.
Now, looking back, was there a certain teacher that you had that you kind of implement your teaching style now on?
2 teachers had a major effect on me at Sac State. One was Dr. Charles Gregory, and his specialty was literature. He did his doctoral thesis on Faulkner, William Faulkner, and he loved the British. So he brought an erudite understanding to what should be happening in English based upon his generation of scholarship. The second at Sac State was Dennis Schmitz, who's a world-renowned poet, an amazing human being, a great teacher. And he made me see poetry in a new way and look at what I did, which in my way of thinking was kind of weird, but I found out in poetry, weird is good. And that was a godsend to me. Later on, I had at Arizona State Norman Doobie and Janine Savard, who had a big effect on me and how I saw what I was doing at that time. So got the MA at Sac State and then moved to the MFA at Arizona State.
So what was your experience at Arizona State like?
I loved it.
The weather was super hot, though.
The weather was super hot. One day it was 128 degrees, to give you an idea. The weather would get so hot that the inside of your mouth would be cold. Give you an idea. So I can tell you, the weather was so hot, I could go on. But one of the things about Arizona that sometimes people don't know is at that time they put fluoride in the water. So if you're really hot and you run to the drinking fountain and get a drink, your mouth gets this film from the fluoride they put in. So there's different practices down there. Like anywhere you go in the world, but in the United States, there's different practices and understandings, and it was an experience, very enjoyable.
Did you think there was kind of like a culture shock, I guess, with the whole water thing, but anything else that was a little bit different?
The students at Arizona referred to Arizona as the zone.
The zone.
And they certainly had a good time. Arizona State was listed as one of the top party schools.
Yeah, I'm sure you
no
have
comment
some
on that.
Stories on that.
Yeah, and the football team was doing well. It was Bruce Snyder from Cal had been picked up. Jake Plummer was our quarterback.
Okay.
So I got to talk to Jake a couple times. Pat Tillman, who's now deceased from the war, also was a person I met on a couple occasions at Arizona State. And we won't say doing what.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
We're
it sounds
having
like an interesting
a lot of
story.
good times there.
Now, as a student, when a student goes into your classroom, is there a level of expectation that you have for them and kind of an expectation you have for them at the end of the year, kind of where you want them to be?
I think it's a journey, and I try to look at it that, hey, we're together here for 18 weeks. You know, there's an old quote from Milton that says the mind can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. And oftentimes, you know, students like myself at that age, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I've got a life. I want to have a good time. And what we're doing as students starting off is we're saying we're doing this to get that. We're not looking at the short term, we're looking at the long term. So I think it's having that plan and looking ahead that's really important. In terms of, you know, what I want to see students do at the end, it's kind of self-guided. What do you want to do at the end? How can I help you get there? I really try to trade on the idea of me as teacher more than professor. And I think there's important differences there. Also, one of the teachers we had here at Solano College, fabled teacher, Bruce Clark, believed that teaching was not even teaching, it was coaching. It was being part of that. And I like that idea. I come from an athletic background. So I think helping students get to where they're going and saying, you and me are on the same team. We're working together.
And, I mean, obviously, growing up, we all take English, and then we have to take English in college. And a lot of people would always say, at least, like, a lot of friends that I had, they're like, you know, certain English teachers grade a certain way, and it's kind of like a biased thing. Do you think that, or do you think that there's, like, every teacher has a certain guideline that they have when it comes to, like, grading papers or looking at essays and stuff like that?
Well, I think there's individuality that exists at every level of education, right? From the students to the teachers to administrators to staff, and I think that has to be understood. And thank all of us for it, because that brings about the individual and how we see things different, diversity in its truest form. But coming back to English, I like to say that there's two gods in English. The small god is grammar. And it's like math, you know, 1 + 1 = 2, a subject and a verb equals a sentence. But there's the greater God, and that's rhetoric, and that's how English is used to serve a purpose. So when you say something like fire, which is just one word, and it's exclamatory, it wouldn't really function in the idea of a sentence. But because you're meaning it as an announcement, it's an exception to the rule, and it's a good example of how purpose then can overcome the small god that is grammar in that way. In terms of methods of teaching, that's when I believe all students should kind of sample. And you see what's out there. It's a smorgasbord. It's a potpourri of styles, and say this one works and this one doesn't. And because of our social media these days, it seems like we can do it to a greater effect.
That's true.
For me, our social media was gossiping and word of mouth. Nowadays, you can really tune in and look at rateyourprofessor.com, and you can talk to one another and then text one another, hopefully not in class, and say, hey, this is good, I'm learning something here, or I'm not learning. And I think that's a good way of evaluating in a very personal way.
Do you think Rate My Professor actually helps? Like, does it kind of help you? You're like, okay, maybe I need to change this, or...
I've never been on it, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
I've had colleagues who've got on it, and some like it and some don't. For me, I believe that if you're on Rate Your Professor, it's either because, hey, I really love this guy, he's great, or I really hate this guy, he sucks.
That's true.
I don't think it's an accurate measurement. And what I try to do is talk to my students, and at the end of the semester, sponsored by me, I ask them to evaluate me. And that's what I read. And some of it's bad. I mean, and some of it's good. What I'm after is the specifics. Kind of seeing it this way. As an athlete, if I played, let's say I played basketball, and I went 8 for 14, and I'd go for 10 rebounds, but I got 6 this day. And so at the end of the night, I'm about 21 points, so I'm doing well. And everyone says, good game. Well, I don't learn anything from that.
That's true.
What I learn is from the assistant coach saying, Schouten, here's where you're not hitting your shots. Be aware of that. Get away from that particular area. On rebounding, you weren't blocking out on these two parts. The lower left block, you need to sidestep on that. And those are things that really are helpful. So for me, when I ask students to evaluate me, and this is kind of going out public, but I'm asking them to criticize me because that's what I learn from. What can I do to be more effective in that way?
Now, you said you have an athletic background. What kind of sports did you play growing up?
I played, well, football, baseball, and basketball. And then later on with my girls, I didn't play, but went out in the field in soccer. That was an experience. But, you know, I grew up playing football, baseball, and basketball, and lifelong fans of those sports. And watch a little hockey as well.
So you said you were a huge Boston Celtics fan. What did you think about Kyrie Irving going over there? Were you happy with the decision?
Yes, yes. And the reason being is that in looking at what you could glean from the press, he was unhappy in Cleveland for whatever reason. But when a player is unhappy, it means that they have something to prove. And the recipient of that player, as they move on, is often gifted, blessed, with that player wanting to prove themselves. And we've been nothing, I say we, I'm almost part of that organization.
Hey, you know what, when you're a fan, that's how it is.
We've been extremely pleased with Mr. Irving's progress and the leadership skills he's shown. His numbers are down in terms of those personal numbers that go to his stat line, but in terms of wins, we lost our first 2 games and haven't lost since. We're on a winning streak. We play Brooklyn tonight, 7-point favorites.
So did you always kind of grow up being a Boston fan, like Red Sox, everything?
Pretty much. I had a cousin who was a Laker fan.
Okay.
So back in those days, it was Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor. And I was a Celtic fan, Bill Russell, big Bill Russell fan. And what it meant for me is the Lakers, and I guess it's basically because of Chamberlain, I saw a selfish ball. Get me the ball and score a lot of one-on-one. And I thought the Celtics passing game was really it. And I love the idea of not just being in the game for yourself, but passing and picking up and playing the game myself. That's what I want to do more than anything else, is make sure the people around me are happy. And I think, and I'm going to come back to teaching here, if you're happy going into the classroom, it's contagious. If you're not happy, it's not. It also carries weight. And I know that all of us, all my students included, everyone has this life and it's not easy. But there is a responsibility to say, okay, I need to get up for this. And it's like, and again, I'll come back to the athletics, it's about getting ready for a game, to put yourself in that mindset to succeed. But that's not to be, you know, understated. Getting into that mindset is very, very difficult to do often.
Now, you said you're not a New England Patriots fan.
Chicago Bears.
Yes. So what was your kind of thought about Jay Cutler going to Miami?
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, Cutler coming in had all the talent in the world. Joe Montana did not coming into the 49ers, and we know how that story ended. It's what's between the ears and being able to read that. And it's also a partnership with the coach, right? So the coach quarterback, Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, match made in heaven, you know, looking at that. The Bears have seemingly had, and this is strange and something to look at through the NFL, how teams have certain personalities and they don't seem to escape it. Chicago's never had a quarterback, never a good quarterback in their history. Right? And so certain teams have identities that they owe up to. Chicago's had a stout defense, great running backs, fantastic middle linebackers with Butkus and Urlacher, and later Singletary. I don't even know who they have now. Don't want to know. But the idea is that as you move through time, teams have an identity, you look to them, and then you start to identify yourself with them and what they stand for. So love the Patriots' idea of organization. If you're going to build a franchise, that would be the team to look at in the NFL. The San Antonio Spurs in basketball for you King fans out there. And then build from that. And then the Celtics, I think, have done really an outstanding job with Danny Ainge at the helm of late. And before that, not so good, but Danny wasn't at the helm.
So we were kind of talking about Tom Brady a little bit earlier before the interview. What are your kind of thoughts about him?
Well, there's a bias growing up because of Joe Montana, and, you know, all my friends 49er fans or Raider fans.
Yeah.
Okay? And so looking at Tom Brady, I'm looking at him from afar, and it makes me a little bit more objective. So not as passionate. And because of that, I'd have to say he's at the top. Longevity, his accomplishments, what he's done, and, you know, the organization around him has changed. There's a joke in Seinfeld where when you're rooting for a team, you're not rooting for the players, you're rooting for the laundry. This is really true when you look at the Belichick-Brady time they've been together.
Yeah.
All the players have changed. The only constant is that quarterback-coach combination. And so if you identify yourself as a New England fan, take out the fact you're rooting for laundry, then you're simply rooting for Tom Brady.
I've heard of a lot of things. Do you think that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick will retire at the same time? Because they've just been that awesome combo. I mean, I'm not a New England fan, or anything, but they are.
Well, there's a difference in that retirement sequence. Tom Brady will retire not because he wants to, but because he has to.
Yeah.
It's a physical game for him. For Belichick, it's a cerebral game. So and you think of Belichick and the time he puts in, that's his identity. So when Belichick retires, I think it will be along the same lines as Brady. He'll be physically worn out by it. But unless Brady goes for another 10 years, which with the TB12 diet, he could, I think Brady's going to retire, and I think Belichick will hang around. I don't think there's that allegiance in that, because I think Belichick stays true to himself in that regard.
Now, I've heard that you actually want to have a class on Boston sports.
One time,
tell us about that.
Well, one time it was mentioned to me that I should teach a class focusing on sports. And we have several athletes here, and it was interesting to me, and so I started putting it together. It's a funny story. So I came into the class, and I was all prepared, and we were going to look at seasonal, 16 weeks in the semester, so football, baseball, basketball, and then that last 4 weeks, it was kind of your choice, right? But only 6 athletes signed up.
Oh, wow.
And not only that, more than half the class weren't sports fans. So I had to think on my feet, and we really got to the point of sports as metaphor rather quickly to save that semester and look at the ways we can read sports in other ways, which is finally what it's all about. You know, the game is a temporary thing that happens on a Sunday afternoon or a Monday night, but it's what you carry away from that game in terms of thinking. And, you know, fans are great because sports fans like to analyze, like to predict, like to think through. And what they're doing is, of course, one of the cornerstones of what we do, especially in critical thinking, and that is cause and effect. And say, if this works, and it works here, why doesn't it work there? And there are these variables, of course, that take place. And so.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that sports kind of can get you through life. It teaches you more than just about playing the game, just overall everything. Is that kind of like what you wanted to teach too? I'm thinking when you said that, I have 2 daughters, and they've been involved in sports. Soccer, my youngest daughter's just finished water polo. Oh, okay.
And there's this feeling, and I want to say it's ebullient health that seems to transcend the sport and carry over to the rest of their lives. And in talking about preparation and understanding that when you go into a game with whatever game plan you have, you still have to think on your feet. So I think it's really good training in terms of setting up your day and understanding schedules. And here's the big thing. Teammates, they depend on you. And, you know, coming into the classroom, all of our journeys are made easier if we work with other people and understand the blessing and the glory of that. So I think sports really pushes that, and that carries over in other walks of life in so many ways.
Now, going back to Solano, what is it about this place that keeps you staying here?
I have a fantastic department that's changed over the years, and its complexity is unbelievable. I mean, we're cruel and we're kind, we're nice and we're mean. We're all the things that we should be. On some things we're really hard-bitten. On others we're really forgiving. We share different backgrounds. We have a huge intellectual scope in terms of interest in literature and composition, creative writing. And it makes me so happy to see those exchanges. I'm now teaching at Vacaville.
Okay.
And I miss my colleagues dearly and show up here when I can, my colleagues in the English. But at Vacaville, I've been talking with Janelle Rhodes, Janine Whitesell, Brad Pascal, Zach Hannon, I forgot his name for a second, in physics has now just moved in. And it's great to all of a sudden be talking to people from other departments and majors, and we've all become fast friends and work together in, what do we work together on, you want to ask? We work together in putting jigsaw puzzles together, and it's really unique kind of cognitive sampling of, you know, how things work.
I think Solano has that family aspect here. So what advice would you give to a student to tell them, come to Solano, don't go to any other community college, but come here?
Trust, in a word. Come and trust us. We're a campus that is really progressive right now. We have great programs, and we're really, really strident in our designs for that education. We want to push. It's almost as if, you know, it's don't call us, we'll call you. We're proactive in believing in what we have to offer, believing in our faculty, and it trickles down, you know, from the administration to the staff to the faculty to the students. And finally, that's our crowning piece, right? I shouldn't say trickle down, it builds up.
Yeah.
The students at the top of the pyramid, where you're there, and it's that moment in time when you first walk into a class, and you're looking at the students, and you're starting to instruct them. And what is your instruction but saying simply, trust me, if you do this, you're going to see a new way of realizing your life. And what is learning but improving? And who doesn't want to improve?
That's very true.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for joining me here today and telling us your story.
Okay, well, thank you for having me
Of
again.
course.
It was great.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of On Campus. I'm Myckena Guerrero, and we'll see you next time.
Hey guys, it's Awad Balazi here, and I'm very excited to announce a new show making its way here on the Solano College Sports Network. The show will be called Paint the Corners, and I'll be the host alongside my partner Chris Zavaglia. The show will be everything baseball related, from the on-field antics to the analytics side. We'll cover every newsworthy headline, from the Houston Astros winning the first World Series title in franchise history to who's the best baseball player, Mike Trout or Bryce Harper. So stay tuned.
If you have an interest in a career in sports broadcasting,
whether it's behind the scenes or on camera,
then this is the class for you.
Class is held every Wednesday from 1:30 to 4:30 in room 121 alongside the library building.
For more information, contact Greg Poff. That's me at solano.edu.
we hope to see you here next semester. And remember,
it's more than just sports. It's an education.